Hi, welcome back. This is the last presentation of Chapter 9, Participation, Campaigns, and Elections. We're going to look a little bit about how voters make their decisions, and then we're going to jump into a consideration of the factors that influenced the last presidential election. I may throw out some things about what may influence this coming election in 2024. So how do voters decide? What factors do voters take into consideration when they are casting their ballot? Again, part of it is party loyalty or disloyalty. Some of it is issues, and some of it is candidates. Regardless of the attempts by campaigns to persuade voters, there are typically three factors that tend to outweigh all others. Partisan loyalty is the most reliable indicator of which candidates Americans will tend to support. Once formed, voters' partisan loyalty seldom change unless some crisis causes a serious re-examination of those loyalties. The last really significant realignment, the one realignment of the 20th century that caused that was the result of the Great Depression, led millions of people who previously had been Republicans to shift their allegiance to the Democratic Party and to Franklin Delano Roosevelt's promise of a New Deal. When you think about it, again, when you say millions, I'm not talking about tens of millions. It's not like everybody stopped becoming Republicans. It was a shift of a few million people, and you say a few million, that's still a lot. But it's in the broader scale of things, when you're talking about more than 100 million voters, a shift of 5% of the vote is really what shifted decisively in the favor of Democrats in the early decades of the 20th century and well into the 1960s. So issues and policy preferences are also an important factor for a lot of Americans. Americans with clearly thought out views on healthcare, climate change, the cost of college education, or cultural issues like abortion or same-sex marriage are more likely to support the candidate or party whose views most clearly align with their own. I've mentioned, the fact that the abortion issue is increasingly shifting the polarity of elections. It used to be that lots and lots of pro-life people, they were one single issue voters. If you were, where you were on the abortion issues, was where those people were going to vote. Well, a lot of women are now moving away from previous allegiance to the Republican Party because of the abortion issue. And there was a special election in a state Senate election, I believe, in Alabama, where a woman who ran solely on abortion defeated a Republican in Alabama on abortion. So, I think that tells you how important that issue has become. Americans are more influenced by the performance of the economy than citizens in other advanced democratic nations as a general rule. When the economy is going well, incumbents, especially the president, are likely to fare better. But when the economy is going badly, as was the case in '92 and 2020, then incumbents beware. Candidate characteristics are also an important factor. Americans strongly support statements that say, "I vote for the candidate rather than the party." It's not always the case, but it often is. 2022 national elections, again, a contest between two candidates not on the ballot. When you look again at the midterm election, when you look at the 2020 and the 2022 candidate race, there were really three crises that drove that. The 2020 presidential election was a tremendously divisive election. The Democratic challenger unequivocally defeated the incumbent president, Donald Trump, in both the popular and electoral college votes. Democrats narrowly retained control of the House of Representatives and surprisingly won two special elections for Georgia's two Senate seats. It was remarkable for taking place amid a national pandemic, a movement for social justice, and rising conspiracy theories regarding the fairness and transparency of elections administration. Again, a polarized political environment. Polarization has been, fed by the increasingly homogenous nature of the two political parties. Democrats are more liberal, Republicans are more conservative. The differences within the Democratic and Republican parties reflect a range of commitments within liberal and conservative ideology, rather than, again, cross-ideological, coalitions. And again, that means that ideology is much more of a dividing line and feeds polarization. Partisan polarization has created a toxic political environment where presidential elections are characterized as contests between good and evil. Democrats attempted impeachment twice of Donald Trump, and Republicans' determination to replace Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg just weeks prior to the 2020 elections only hardened partisan hostility. The campaign itself in 2020, again, the primaries resulted in Barack Obama's Vice President Joe Biden securing the nomination. The 2020 cycle took place during a major pandemic, which killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. As of April of 2024, 1.1 million Americans have died by causes attributable to COVID. And there are several significant changes to election rules as a result of COVID-19, where mail-in ballots were increasingly access to mail-in ballots was expanded. The incumbent President Donald Trump's anti-mask and promotion of dubious drugs as cure-alls for COVID-19 contributed to vaccine skepticism, and also to some extent to poor American performance in terms of responding to the pandemic. Likewise, the social justice protests as a result of the police-involved killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis sparked the nationwide Black Lives Matter protests that also, again, contributed to polarization. The result, turnout for the presidential election was historic, with nearly 159 million votes cast, 66.4% of the eligible electorate. Donald Trump began complaining of a rigged election weeks prior to the election, predicting that he would be winning by a lot on election night and it would be stolen the days following the election. That is sort of him playing up what elections experts call the red mirage, because a lot of Democratic voters were voting by mail and a lot of Republican voters were voting on election day. Election day votes get counted first. That would have made him look like he was winning. Congressional elections saw Democrats control the House narrow as Republicans won back 12 seats. But Democrats, again, were able to win 2 special elections, giving them narrow control of the Senate. Donald Trump became the first defeated incumbent to refuse to accept the legitimacy of an election's outcome. And again, basically undertook several actions to reverse the outcome of the election. Trump's Stop the Steal rallies took place throughout the country and culminated in the January 6th Capitol riots, as Trump supporters stormed the Capitol in a bid to stop Congress from counting the Electoral College votes and finalizing the elections. I think ultimately he hoped to throw the election into the House of Representatives, where he would have likely prevailed. One consequence of the large use of mail-in ballots was that it took longer. It took 4 days to determine the outcome. The delay, again, stoked suspicions on both sides that were further cultivated by Trump's conspiracy theories. 2 key shifts contributed to a different outcome of the 2020 elections compared to 2016. The 2020 election appeared to be a retrospective election, with voters judging the incumbent's pandemic performance and the state of the economy. When you think again about what happened to Trump, part of it was he had a record and he ran a poor campaign. And black voters voted at much higher rates. Other minorities voted at much higher rates. Again, I don't think that was as much in reaction to, loving Joe Biden as much as it was to a lot of minority people thinking that we didn't need 4 more years of Donald Trump. So who participates in political campaigns and elections? And again, when you look at it by education, it's clear. People with college education, people with doctorates are far more likely to participate than younger Americans. By age, it's also an important characteristic. Older Americans simply participate at higher rates. Likewise, percentage of U.S. adults who say they have done each of the following: contribute money, attended a political rally. Again, if you look at it, people with higher levels of educational attainment do all of these things, right? So what do we think? As the right to vote has been extended to previously disfranchised Americans, electoral competition has intensified, with some Americans increasingly questioning the legitimacy of elections as a democratic process, and questioned the value of democracy, where they think that certain people who are not capable of being responsible citizens are now given the vote. So, what barriers to participation do you observe among your friends and family? What reforms do you think would help facilitate the participation of eligible voters? Will moneyed interests continue to play a large part in the election process? What new laws may be needed to make electoral rules fairer? How might you be involved in elections and campaigns in the future? What do you think you need to do to make your voice heard? What changes would you undertake to increase electoral participation of young people? These are good questions. So when we come back, we are moving on to a discussion of straightforward political institutions. Especially next week, we're going to start with a discussion of Congress and the presidency. So I will see you next time. And again, study hard, learn a lot. There's again not a lot of time in this class, so be efficient. And I'll see you next time.